The Jets have the second most cap space, almost $70 million worth to play with, Galata. And with a new head coach and Robert Saleh, a lot of uncertainty as to what they'll do with the second overall pick in next month's draft, and the status of Sam Darnold. Is he a potential trade chip moving forward? So a lot of questions for the Jets to answer. But when you have this amount of cap space to play with, I think these are questions that can be answered. I think the only thing left is, will the Jets answer these questions sufficiently? Will they get the right guys in the right spots to move forward? Or will this be yet another offseason of maybe some disappointing signings that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at free agency, like, I know the Jets have a ton of space, but if you don't sign the right guys, it goes very quickly, and then you're stuck paying them, and then you have a lot of dead cap hits, and it happened to the Jets in the past. So free agency could be risky even if you have a lot of space. And that's why, when you look at this Jets team, I feel like they also have 9 draft picks. So, there's also risk with draft picks, but the money's not tied there. It's not as much. So, at least you have some leeway there. But looking at the Jets, they basically need every position besides like safety and interior defensive line. So you can go in a ton of different directions. And when you have 70 million in cap space, I mean, there's just, a lot of areas that you open up to, and there's a lot of guys that, who knows, may not have as many suitors because not a lot of teams have just this balloon amount in cap space. But kind of the place where I would start is receiver for the Jets. I mean, that's, whoever their quarterback's going to be. You talked about Sam Darnold maybe getting traded, maybe not, but they need a number one receiver. And that's where, to me, you give the money to Kenny Golladay. I think he's a young guy, so he can kind of grow with a young team. He, to me, was outstanding with Detroit, and, that offense, not the greatest, but he's definitely a number one piece. When you look at other guys for them, I just feel like he's the best, and I think they can outbid other teams to get it. Probably a 5-year deal, 80 million, somewhere around there, but they have the cap space so they can do it. But I'd start out with receiver, and Kenny Golladay would be my guy.
I'm so happy you said that, Galata, because I'm thinking in my head, imagine if on Monday we hear, all right, the Jets have just gotten Kenny Golladay. They signed him, and then they go ahead. Maybe they bring back, a Perriman and get a few more pieces. Even if that's the case, if you're Sam Darnold, are you excited knowing, oh, there's toys here that I can play with now? Or are you thinking, well, these weapons are for Zach Wilson, they're for somebody else, or for a Deshaun Watson or somebody like that? If the Jets can make that trade and pull the trigger, I have to think for Sam Darnold, I think even though that's the best case scenario, it's kind of almost the worst case scenario, because you're seeing them make moves, especially on the offensive side of the football. But if those weapons aren't for you, then it's just kind of a moot point where you're kind of watching the team rebuild while simultaneously looking to take you and send you elsewhere. It really has to be just an excruciating position for Sam Darnold to be in, just not knowing, if the Jets are aggressive and use that money for offense, those weapons may not be for him at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, with Darnold, it's just interesting where the Jets go. I think they'll end up trading him or something like that. I just feel like with the new regime, you kind of want to start over. And I mean, we'll see if it's Watson or through the draft. But I mean, if I'm the Jets, I would try to either draft one, or I mean, if you could get Deshaun Watson, you go get Deshaun Watson. And, when you look at that offense, whoever's going to be your quarterback, you need guys to throw to. And last year, they didn't have those guys. I mean, they just didn't. And then running the ball, too. They didn't have a running back, really. Frank Gore could talk about that for days. But you got to start somewhere. When you look around the NFL and the really good teams that were really good last year, teams had great receivers. Look at Kansas City with Tyreek Hill. The Bucs had that amazing receiving core with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, AB. And, the 2 teams that made the Super Bowl had these amazing wide receivers. You kind of have to then start with Golladay, who's a guy that I think could grow into one, top 5 receiver, top 10 receiver. And to me, that money would be a little less risky giving to a younger player that, most likely isn't going to fall off. He's most likely going to stay good. I mean, I know he was injured last year, but he'd be that main guy. I don't want to see them get Juju, though, Smith-Schuster. That would be a guy, if they throw out the money to him. To me, he just hasn't proved that he's a number one guy. And that's kind of a Jets move, like, oh, we're going to give the money to this guy who maybe hasn't proved it yet. But I would try to get the number one guy, because you have the cap space to do it. And if I was going to splurge on one guy, I would say Golladay receiver or edge rusher, because those are so much needed in the NFL. But to me, those two positions is where I'd go at.
Yeah, and the Jets are going to have their pick of the litter. If they want to throw money at Shaq Barrett or a Leonard Floyd, a Hassan Reddick, they're going to be free to do so. And that's what it gives you. And for the Jets, they feel like if they can just get a couple of pieces and use those draft picks wisely, they can turn it around quickly. I mean, when you think about the AFC East, obviously Buffalo's there and they're not going anywhere, but the Patriots, they've taken a step back. The Dolphins are on the come up, but for the Jets, if they can get the right pieces, as you mentioned earlier, it can be a very quick turnaround where we could see this team, vying for a wild card spot. But I think it's going to start at the quarterback position, and you can get who you want and you can make these signings. But unless the Jets address that and say, all right, we're going to trade Sam, we're going to send him elsewhere, we're going to draft Zach Wilson, that is our guy. Or we're going to trade Sam and bring in a Deshaun Watson, and that's who we're rolling with. Until they address where they're going with the quarterback position, it feels like, they could spend as much money as possible. But if you don't have that shirt up, I mean, that's the most important position in the league, Galata. Yeah. So, it as a Saints fan and me as an Eagles fan, when that quarterback position isn't filled with a competent person, you're not going to go very far.
No, for sure. And that's the thing with the Jets. Like, I hope they have a plan at quarterback right now going into free agency and not just spending all this money for not knowing who your quarterback is. Like, maybe it's Deshaun Watson, but if we can't get Deshaun Watson, this is our number 2. And if we can't get, maybe a draft pick, then this is our number 3. And then you could kind of build your free agent plan around that. And that's something that, I mean, if I'm the Jets, you have to do, because you can't just spend they're not going to get the quarterback in free agency. I think we kind of all know that. At that point, you probably will just stick with Darnold. If you don't draft someone, don't get Watson. So, I mean, when looking at free agents, you probably want to build around whoever that quarterback's going to be. And you're hoping that they have a plan in place. And I do think they will. And, I think this new regime, when looking in, they look a little smarter than the Adam Gases, of the world. We'll have to see. But I do think that this team, I mean, you got to build those complementary pieces in free agency, draft well, get some stars there. So, I mean, you're not paying, especially right away, you're not paying these stars a ton of money, and then you can build with a Kenny Golladay. You can pay him an edge rusher. I would love if they get Shaq Barrett. Just get him out of the NFC South, please, so he's not terrorizing whoever the Saints quarterback is next year. Because, that whole front seven is just crazy. So hopefully the Jets throw money at him so the Bucs don't have a chance to. So that's just what I'm hoping there. I mean, Yannick Ngakoue is another guy that I think would be a really good fit with them too. But I mean, those are like wide receiver, edge rusher. I would throw money at them because they're just so important. And when you're looking at where they're going to draft, again, if you're drafting at number 2, you're probably not getting a receiver, probably not getting an edge rusher, maybe at 23. But those are positions where I think you can fill in free agency with success, I think. And when you look at those are, to me, top 2.
Yeah, I will say under Adam Gase, when you've been eating chicken bleep for the last couple of years, and then you finally get a taste of what chicken salad actually tastes like, I think it's 2 different things. So I imagine that the Jets, without Adam Gase, Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, they seem to be in lockstep together. And I imagine that they will be very assertive in using their money and bringing in some good pieces, especially offensively, to get that jump started and to get the Jets moving in the right direction.